Hello and welcome to Sex Ed for Tween Parents. I'm really glad that you're here because this season is going to be a bit different and it's for parents who know that their autistic tween needs sex ed, but also know that a lot of the usual advice out there just does not quite fit. Because autistic kids, they don't need different sex ed topics. What they actually need is sex ed that works for them. And that's a really important difference. They still need to learn about bodies, puberty, privacy, consent, boundaries, relationships, safety, and growing up and stuff. And the topics, they're not the issue. The issue is that a lot of sex ed is taught in ways that are too vague, too fast, too pressure filled, too reliant on social guessing, and too dependent on kids being able to respond clearly in the moment. And for a lot of autistic kiddos, that just does not work. So this season is about what does work. Now, I want to tell you a bit about me because the way I teach this has been shaped by professional knowledge and also lived experience. I'm CATH HAKANSON. I'm a nurse, sex educator. I'm also autistic and ADHD myself, and I was late diagnosed. I come from a family where neurodivergence is multi-generational, and I'm also parenting neurodivergent teens and young adults myself. So this work, it's personal for me as well as professional. Before I was diagnosed, look, I'll be honest, I did not fully understand why lived experience mattered so much. I questioned it and I thought, surely, having good training, good qualifications, good intentions, and great resources should be enough. And then I got diagnosed, and going through that assessment process and getting that certainty that, yes, I am autistic, it actually changed something in me. And it changed how I saw myself. And it changed how I understood my own life. And it also changed how I look at sex education. I started reflecting much more deeply on the kind of sex ed I'd been teaching, the assumptions that were lying underneath it, and what actually makes information usable, safe, and accessible for autistic kids. And I realized something really important. And even though a lot of what I was doing already leaned neuro-affirming and trauma aware, the way I teach now is different to how I taught before my diagnosis. Now it's clearer, more precise, more respectful of autistic processing, and more aware of sensory load, freeze, delayed processing, literal thinking, and what it actually means to teach in a way that works with the child rather than against them. And look, that shift mattered. And it's one of the reasons that I feel so strongly that when parents are trying to learn how to support their autistic child with sex ed, that lived experience really does matter too. And not because lived experience is the only thing that matters, but because it gives you a layer of understanding that is very hard to get any other way. It changes what you notice. It changes what you question. And it changes what you no longer accept as good enough. Love, sex, and human sexuality have fascinated me my whole life. This is my topic, my passion. It always has been. And the way I teach sex ed comes from that deep, focused interest. But it also comes from my qualifications, my clinical background, the people and the families I've worked with, and a lot of deep reflection on what genuinely helps and what quietly lets kids down. And there is another really important part of my philosophy that I want to say up front. I do not believe that autistic kids need to be taught out of being themselves. I don't believe they need to be taught to look less autistic. And I don't believe that autistic ways of communicating and socializing are wrong. Autistic kids, they already have social ways of being. They already communicate and they already connect as well. And the problem is not that they're missing some set of acceptable social skills. The problem is that neurotypical communication gets treated like the default, and autistic kids are so often expected to do all the adapting. Now, that doesn't mean that we do nothing. Autistic kids, they still need boundaries. They still need explicit teaching. And yes, they do need help understanding neurotypical communication. because that is the world that they're moving through. Sadly, the world doesn't meet them halfway nearly enough. So I do think kids need help understanding how neurotypical people communicate, what they expect, and then how to also navigate through that safely. But that is very different from teaching autistic kids not to be themselves. So I am not here to teach masking as safety. And I am not here to also teach compliance as success. And I'm not here to teach autistic kids that their way of being is a problem. What I'm here to do, though, is to help parents teach sex ed in ways that respect autistic communication, autistic processing, autistic bodies, and autistic nervous systems, while still preparing kids for the world that they actually live in. And that matters too, because neuro-affirming sex ed is about much more than just putting an autistic label on something, which I see all the time, and I'm sorry, but it really pisses me off, and saying that language is simple and literal. It is much more than using clear words, and it is more than stripping out euphemisms. And it's much more than making a standard resource look autism friendly on the surface. Slapping an autism or autistic or even Asperger's label on it, and all of a sudden it's supposed to be able to help parents and kids. For me, neuro-affirming sex ed means something much deeper than that. It means I do not use ABA. I don't use compliance-based teaching, and I don't teach in ways that expect autistic kids to override their body, ignore sensory distress, perform understanding, or fit themselves into neurotypical expectations just to stay safe. That's not my approach. My approach is that sex ed should work with the child and not against them. It should be clear. It should be direct. It should be respectful, and it should be usable in real life. And it should not rely on fast processing, reading between the lines, eye contact, perfect timing, emotional performance, or saying the right thing under pressure. Because safety should not depend on a child looking confident, sounding clear, or reacting fast enough for adults to understand them. And look, that matters a lot for autistic kids. So in this season, we're going to talk about what actually changes when you're teaching sex ed to autistic tweens. And we're going to talk about why generic advice often misses the mark, why one big talk usually backfires, why clarity matters so much, as well as timing, and how puberty can show up, as well as how to teach privacy, talk about masturbation without shame, and why compliance is not consent. We're going to look at why freeze matters and what actually makes sex ed safer and more accessible. And even though this season is specifically for parents of autistic tweens, here's the interesting part. The way that I teach sex ed works better for everyone because clearer teaching actually helps everyone, and safer teaching helps everyone too. Less shame, less guesswork as well. But autistic kids are often the ones who pay the highest price, especially when teaching is vague, pressure-filled, or built around invisible rules. So that's why this season exists. It's not about making sex ed harder. It's about making it fit. Same topics, better fit. There's going to be clearer teaching, safer learning. So if you're the parent of an autistic tween and you've ever thought, I know this matters, but I don't know how to do it in a way that actually works for my child, then you're in the right place. Let's get into it.